Dad, how do you like the $100,000 I gave you through Brenda? My millionaire son came to visit me on my birthday and asked. I laughed bitterly. Son, she only gave me a pair of socks. At that moment, a new car pulled up outside my driveway and his wife got out. Betrayal or justice? The consequences will be loud. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The gift bag weighed nothing. I stood at my front door, staring at the cheap plastic handles, feeling the emptiness before I even looked inside. Brenda had thrust it toward me from her car window without meeting my eyes, and now she was gone, tail lights disappearing down the street before I could invite her in for coffee. I walked back into my rental house and set the bag on the kitchen table. The afternoon light came through the window at an angle that made everything look dusty and small. This place had 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that barely fit a table for 4. Not like the house I'd owned for 30 years. The one with the backyard where Woodrow learned to throw a baseball. The one with the finished basement and the mortgage I'd paid off 5 years early. I opened the bag slowly like it might contain something fragile. Socks. A pair of black dress socks still attached with a plastic clip. The price tag dangled from one ankle. $5.99, discount store brand. My 62nd birthday gift. I sat down hard in the chair, the same chair I'd sat in every night for 4 years now, eating dinners for one. The socks felt scratchy between my fingers. I turned them over, checked for a card, a note, anything. Nothing. Just socks that Woodrow, my son, my only child, had apparently asked his wife to deliver while he was extremely busy with the new contracts. That's what Brenda had said, standing in her idling Honda Civic, one hand on the wheel, ready to leave before she'd even arrived. This is from Woodrow. He's extremely busy with the new contracts. Happy birthday. No smile, no warmth, just words delivered like a court summons. I set the socks down next to the single place setting I'd arranged that morning. 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 knife. I'd even put out a cloth napkin, the nice ones from before, trying to maintain some dignity. The casserole in the oven filled the small kitchen with the smell of cheese and chicken. Enough for 3 people. I'd made too much again. I always made too much. He's building something important, I said aloud to the empty room. My voice sounded hollow. Success requires sacrifice. I understand that. But I didn't understand. Not really. Not when I walked past the photo on the mantel. Woodrow in his graduation gown, my arm around his shoulders. Both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. That was 15 years ago, back when I still had the house. Back when I thought I was building something for both of us. The memory arrived without invitation, sitting in that real estate office 4 years ago, March of 2021, watching the agent slide papers across the desk. My hand had shaken when I signed. 30 years of mortgage payments, of mowing the lawn every Sunday, of Christmas lights on the eaves, reduced to signatures on documents I barely read. The agent had talked about market conditions and equity and comparable sales, but all I heard was the sound of my pen scratching across lines, giving away my home, then the bank. 2 weeks later, I'd walked in with trembling knees and walked out, having handed my son a check for $200,000. Woodrow had hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. Dad, this investment will change everything. Once we expand, I'll buy you a new house, something even better. I promised. I'd believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. He had a business degree from a good school, a plan, a vision. He'd shown me spreadsheets and projections and letters of intent from major clients. The expansion would double his revenue within 2 years, he said. Triple it within 5. He'd be able to pay me back, and then some. 4 years later, I was still waiting in a rental house that smelled like someone else's cigarette smoke embedded in the walls. I pulled the casserole from the oven and served myself a portion that looked lonely on the plate. Sat back down at the table. The empty chair across from me seemed to grow larger as I ate, like it was expanding to fill the space where a family should be. I'd hoped Woodrow might stop by. Brenda had said he was busy, but surely he'd make time for his father's birthday. Surely he'd want to celebrate together like we used to. The socks sat next to my plate like an accusation. $5.99. I did the math without wanting to. 200,000 divided by 599 equals. I stopped. The numbers made me feel sick. After dinner, I washed the dishes slowly, watching the sky darken through the window above the sink. The water ran hot over my hands, soap bubbles catching the last rays of sunlight. This was my life now. Careful economy, quiet evenings, waiting for something to change. Woodrow's business was thriving. I knew that much from the rare times we talked. He'd mentioned contracts with national retailers, expansion into 3 new states, hiring more staff, success, everything we'd hoped for. So why was I still here in this rental eating alone? The phone rang just as I pulled the plug from the drain. I dried my hands on a dish towel and picked up, expecting a robocall, or maybe a wrong number. Dad. Woodrow's voice sounded wrong, strained, tight in a way I'd never heard before. Hey, son. Thanks for the dad. I'm coming over. He cut me off, words rushing out. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. Something in his tone, the urgency, the way he didn't wait for me to respond. Is everything all right? Just I'll be there soon. Don't go anywhere. The line went dead. I stood holding the phone, staring at the black screen, feeling my heart rate pick up. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Outside, a car passed on the street, headlights sweeping across the wall. I looked at the cheap socks on the table, at the photo on the mantel, at the empty chair. Something was coming. Something had shifted. I could feel it in my chest. A tightness that had nothing to do with age or anxiety, and everything to do with the tone of my son's voice. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street, waiting for headlights to turn into my driveway. I couldn't stop moving, window to kitchen to window again, checking my watch every 90 seconds like that would make Woodrow arrive faster. 23 minutes since the call. The casserole sat congealing on the counter. I picked up the socks, set them down, picked them up again. My hands needed something to do. When headlights finally swept across the living room wall, I was at the window before his car engine stopped. Woodrow climbed out slowly, like a man carrying weight on his shoulders. Even in the porch light, I could see exhaustion carved into his face. I opened the door before he knocked. Hey, Dad. He stepped inside and I noticed immediately that he didn't smile. Didn't make eye contact for more than a second. Nice night. Is it? I closed the door, watched him stand in the middle of my small living room, like he didn't know what to do with his body. You sounded worried on the phone. Did I? He looked around the room. Really looked, taking in the cramped space, the worn furniture, the obvious difference between this place and what I used to have. His eyes stopped on the kitchen table on the socks still lying there. He walked over, picked them up, turned them over in his hands. The price tag dangled, his jaw tightened. He set the socks down carefully like they might break. Business has been good, he said, not looking at me. Really good. We landed 3 major contracts this quarter. Revenue's up 40% from last year. That's wonderful, son. Which is why I wanted to do something meaningful for your birthday. He turned to face me then, and something in his expression made my chest constrict. Something that would make a real difference. I waited. The room felt too warm. How did you like it? The question hung between us like a trap I couldn't see. The socks are fine, practical. I the $100,000, Dad. His voice dropped, each word deliberate. How are you planning to use it? The floor seemed to tilt. Son, I don't understand. Brenda brought me socks. Just socks. That's impossible. Woodrow pulled out his phone with hands that shook slightly. I gave her 100,000 in cash this morning. Cash, Dad. I counted it myself. I have a photo. He held the phone toward me on the screen. A thick manila envelope opened to show stacks of $100 bills, crisp and new. More money than I'd seen in one place since selling my house. The timestamp read 9:47 a.m. Today's date. I handed this to Brenda at breakfast. Woodrow said his voice had gone flat, mechanical. Told her to bring it to you. Told her it was important, that you'd sacrificed too much for too long. She said she'd deliver it this afternoon. I looked at the socks on the table, back at the photo, at my son's face, which had gone pale. She came by around 2 o'clock, I said slowly, stayed in her car, handed me the bag through the window, left before I could ask her inside. Woodrow's phone slipped from his hand, clattered on the table. He braced himself against the back of a chair, breathing hard through his nose. "That's $100,000, he said to the floor. $100,000? Where?" Headlights swept through the window, bright enough to make us both turn. The sound of an engine, expensive and quiet, purring to a stop outside. Through the glass, I watched a brand new Tesla Model Y pull into my driveway. Metallic blue paint gleaming under the street light. The driver's door opened. Brenda stepped out, carrying shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford to window shop in. Woodrow's face did something I'd never seen before. All the color drained away, then rushed back, dark and furious. He was out the door before I could speak, moving across the driveway with long strides that ate up the distance. I followed, my heart hammering. "Woodrow." Brenda's smile looked painted on, too bright. "What are you both doing out here?" "I just stopped by to grab something I left." "Where's the money I gave you for Dad?" Woodrow's voice cut through her words like a blade. "The $100,000? She froze. The shopping bags rustled in her grip. "I don't know what you mean. This morning at breakfast, I handed you an envelope with $100,000 in cash and told you to bring it to my father for his birthday." "Oh, that." She laughed, but it sounded wrong. Too high. "Woodrow, don't be dramatic. I delivered your gift this afternoon." "Socks." I spoke for the first time, stepping up beside my son. "You brought me a pair of discount socks." Brenda's eyes flicked to me, then away. "That's what you gave me to deliver." "I don't know anything about." "Show me your phone." Woodrow held out his hand. "Right now, show me the envelope." "I don't have to show you anything." Her voice rose defensive. "How dare you accuse me in front of your father after everything I've done for this family?" "That's a $100,000 car." Woodrow pointed at the Tesla. "You drove a 7-year-old Honda this morning. Where did you get that car, Brenda?" The bag slipped from her hands, spilling across the driveway. Designer labels, expensive clothes, things that cost more than my monthly rent. "You want to know where I got it?" Her face twisted into something ugly. "I bought it with my money. Money I've earned dealing with your constant work schedule, your obsession with expanding the business, your endless devotion to she bet a finger toward me. Him. That was my money." Woodrow's voice dropped to something cold and final. "That was my father's birthday gift. You stole it. Your father has taken enough from us already." Brenda's voice cracked like breaking glass. "You sold your house for him, gave him everything, and he still expects more. $100,000 for what? So he can live like a king while we struggle." "We're not struggling." Woodrow spoke each word carefully, like explaining something to a child. "We have a 6-bedroom house. You drive a luxury car now, apparently. We took 2 vacations last year. The only one struggling is my father, who gave up his home so I could build something. You're choosing him over me?" She stepped back toward the Tesla, eyes wild. "After everything I've sacrificed, after standing by you through every late night, every business trip, every get in your car." Woodrow's voice could have frozen water. "We'll discuss this at home." "Discuss?" She let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "There's nothing to discuss. You've already made your choice." I said, "We'll talk at home." He walked to his own car without looking back, shoulders rigid, hands clenched at his sides. The engine started. He pulled out of the driveway without waiting. Brenda stood in the dark next to her expensive new car, shopping bags scattered around her feet, like evidence at a crime scene. She looked at me once, and what I saw in her face wasn't remorse or shame. It was hatred. Then she got in the Tesla, reversed too fast, and disappeared down the street in the opposite direction from Woodrow. I stood alone in my driveway, looking at the drop shopping bags at the spot where $100,000 had been stolen from me by someone who'd sat at my dinner table and smiled while serving herself my food. Inside, the cheap socks still sat on the kitchen table, $5.99. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the socks, still lying where I'd left them the night before, watching sunlight creep across the worn tablecloth. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brenda's face in the driveway, twisted with hatred. Shopping bags scattered at her feet, like confetti at a funeral. My phone rang at 8:15. "Dad." Woodrow's voice sounded hollow, scraped raw. I stayed at a hotel last night. I couldn't be in that house with her. I straightened in my chair, gripping the table edge. Where are you now? Still here. The Hampton Inn on Division. A pause stretched between us, filled with things neither of us wanted to say. I'm filing for divorce today. I need to know, did I do the right thing? The question hung in the air like something fragile that might shatter if I answered wrong. Through my kitchen window, I watched a neighbor walk past with a dog, ordinary life continuing while my son's world collapsed. You did what any man with integrity would do. I said. You chose the truth. He exhaled long and shaky. Robert Coleman. That's the attorney I'm meeting with at 10 o'clock. He came recommended. Good. Let him handle the legal side. That's what he's trained for. I keep thinking about her face last night. The way she looked at you. His voice hardened. I married someone I didn't know at all. After we hung up, I finally dumped the cold coffee down the sink and made fresh. The week crawled by in fragments of phone calls and waiting. Woodrow would text brief updates, met with Coleman, gathering financial records, then papers being filed tomorrow. Each message arrived like a bulletin from a distant war I couldn't see, but felt in my bones. I maintained my routines because stopping would mean surrendering to the chaos. Morning walks around the neighborhood, grocery shopping on Tuesday. But I'd pause mid-stride when my phone buzzed, or stand at my mailbox longer than necessary, checking for something I couldn't name. On the 8th day after the confrontation, March 22nd by the calendar I'd started keeping, Woodrow called during my afternoon walk. She's been served, he said without preamble. Robert says the courier delivered the papers an hour ago. How do you feel? Like I'm watching someone else's life fall apart. His voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Robert warned me she'll fight hard. She's hired Judith Rice. Apparently, she specializes in aggressive divorce tactics. Let her fight, I said, watching a crow land on a telephone wire overhead. The facts are on your side. I hope you're right, Dad. I really hope you're right. The call came 3 hours later. I was in my living room trying to read a book I'd already forgotten twice when my phone lit up with Brenda's name. I stared at the display, considering letting it go to voicemail, but something in me needed to hear what she'd say, needed to understand what I was dealing with. Hello, Brenda. This is all your fault. Her voice exploded through the speaker, so loud I pulled the phone away from my ear. You poisoned Woodrow against me. You couldn't stand seeing him happy with someone else. I stood up, began pacing the small room, kept my voice level. You stole $100,000 meant for me. That's not my doing. That's yours. I didn't steal anything. That money should have been invested in the business, in our future, not wasted on you. She was crying now, or pretending to. Hard to tell which. You've taken enough from us already. Years of Woodrow choosing you over me, putting your needs first, and now this. Brenda, I haven't asked my son for anything. He chose to give me that money. You chose to take it. You think you can destroy my life and walk away. Her voice dropped to something cold and sharp. You're going to regret interfering in my marriage. I'll make sure of it. My hand tightened on the phone. Are you threatening me? Take it however you want. The line went dead. I stood in the center of my living room, holding the silent phone, looking out at the quiet street where nothing had changed. A car passed. The crow was still on the wire. The world kept turning while threats landed in my ear like stones. 3 days later, on March 25th, the letter arrived. I opened it, standing by my front door. Registered mail requiring my signature. The return address read Judith Rice, attorney at law, family practice. Inside 3 pages of legal letterhead detailed demands that made my chest tighten. I sat down at the kitchen table and read it again. Slowly, this time retrieved a pen from the drawer and began highlighting key phrases. Equitable distribution of marital assets, including 50% of business equity. Compensation for emotional damages sustained during marriage. Additional claim against Hubert Murphy for willful interference in marital relationship. Seeking damages in the amount of $50,000. I set the pen down carefully. Read the paragraph about me a third time to make sure I understood correctly. Brenda wasn't just fighting the divorce. She was coming after me directly, claiming I deliberately sabotaged her marriage, demanding money I didn't have for damages I hadn't caused. The audacity of it struck me first, then the danger. She'd stolen from me, and now she was positioning herself as my victim, trying to rewrite the narrative, make herself the injured party deserving compensation. I looked at the cheap socks still on the counter where I'd moved them days ago. $5.99. She'd stolen $100,000 and given me $5.99, and now she wanted $50,000 more. So that's how she wants to play it, I said aloud to the empty kitchen. My voice sounded different, harder. Fine, let's play. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it back in the envelope, and placed it in a drawer, not hiding it, filing it. The first piece of evidence in whatever came next. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across my small rental. I'd spent 4 years here, making excuses, waiting for things to improve, accepting less than I deserved, because I didn't want to cause problems for my son. That was finished. Now, Brenda had made this personal. She threatened me, blamed me, tried to make me the villain in her story of theft and betrayal, but she'd made one critical mistake. She assumed I'd stay passive. She assumed I'd accept her version of events and fade into the background while she took whatever she could grab. She didn't know me as well as she thought. I walked to my desk, pulled out a notebook, and began making a list. Evidence, witnesses, timeline, facts that could be verified, documented, proven. My years teaching history had taught me that narratives aren't built on emotions. They're built on evidence. The truth isn't what people claim. It's what they can demonstrate. If Brenda wanted a war, she'd get one. But it would be fought on my terms. With my rules, using weapons she didn't know I had. The socks had disappeared from my kitchen counter. I'd put them away in a drawer 3 days ago. Not out of forgiveness, but out of necessity. They represented the emotional wound. What I needed now was strategy. I sat at my small desk with my laptop open, a fresh notebook beside me, and a pen that had graded 1,000 history papers. If Brenda wanted to make me the defendant in her story, I'd need to build a case. Not the emotional kind, the documented kind, the kind that holds up in court. I started with what was public. Brenda's Facebook page loaded slowly on my aging computer. She'd never made it private. Vanity maybe, or carelessness. I scrolled backward through her posts, looking for anything related to the Tesla. Mid-March. Then I found it. March 16th. The day after she stole my birthday money. The post showed her standing next to a gleaming blue Tesla Model Y in what was clearly a dealership showroom. Her smile stretched wide, almost manic. The caption read, "Dreams really do come true. Tesla life, dream car, new beginnings. Blessed." I stared at the timestamp posted at 2:47 p.m. March 16th, 2025. Less than 24 hours after she'd handed me $5 socks through her car window. Document everything, I said quietly to myself, opening a folder on my desktop labeled documentation. I took screenshots from multiple angles, making sure each one showed the date, time, and URL clearly visible. Then I scrolled further. 3 more posts that day. One from the parking lot showing the car from different angles. Another from her driveway at home. A 4th showing the interior leather seats pristine with the caption, "Worth the wait, Tesla model, luxury life." I saved them all methodically, creating a timeline that Brenda herself had documented. She'd been so proud, so eager to show off her new acquisition that she'd created a perfect trail of evidence linking the theft to the purchase. But social media posts alone wouldn't be enough. I needed corroboration. I studied the dealership photos carefully. The showroom had distinctive features. Large glass windows, a specific arrangement of vehicles, signage visible in the reflection. I zoomed in on one image until I could make out the name. West Side Tesla, with a Portland address. 2 hours later, I pulled into their parking lot. The showroom gleamed with the antiseptic brightness of expensive things. A young salesman approached immediately, sensing potential commission. I played the part he expected. Retirement age man considering a significant purchase, doing research, taking his time. "The Model Y is our most popular vehicle," he said, enthusiasm genuine. "Great choice. I noticed one in my neighborhood recently," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Gorgeous blue color. Really caught my eye." His face lit up. "Oh, that might have been the one we sold last week." Lady paid cash. You don't see that often with these prices. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression mildly interested. Cash. That's unusual these days, isn't it? Very. He leaned in like sharing a secret. But she was determined. Had it all planned out. Came in with the exact amount in an envelope. Memorable transaction. You know, most people finance. I bet. I gestured toward the blue Model Y on the showroom floor. Well, it's certainly a beautiful car. Mind if I take a closer look? I spent 20 minutes asking technical questions, taking a test drive, maintaining the fiction of a potential buyer. Before I left, I collected a business card and made sure the salesman's name, Derek Patterson, was printed clearly on it. Back home, I added Derek's card to my documentation folder and wrote detailed notes about our conversation while the memory was fresh. Date, time, direct quotes where I could remember them exactly. The unusual cash transaction, his clear memory of it. 2 pieces of evidence, but I needed more. I thought back to my birthday, to Brenda's rushed visit, less than 3 minutes from arrival to departure. Someone that hurried, that eager to leave. Someone might have noticed. Carol Thompson, my neighbor, 3 houses down. She spent most afternoons on her porch, reading or watching the street. Had she been there on March 15th? I waited until April 1st, giving myself a few days to formulate the right approach. When I saw Carol on her porch that afternoon, I walked down the sidewalk carrying a small notepad. Carol, I called out, do you remember my birthday, March 15th? She looked up from her book, smiling. Of course. I saw you sitting up earlier that day. Why did you happen to notice when my daughter-in-law stopped by that afternoon? Her expression shifted, became more attentive. I did actually. It struck me as odd. She barely stayed 5 minutes, maybe less. Pulled up, handed you something through the window, and left. I remember thinking it seemed rushed for a birthday visit. Relief and vindication washed through me in equal measure. Would you be willing to write down what you remember? Carol took the notepad without hesitation. How specific should I be? Just what you remember. The date, time, if you recall it. How long she stayed. She wrote carefully, her handwriting neat and deliberate. When she finished, she dated and signed the bottom, without me asking. I hope this helps with whatever's going on, she said, handing back the notepad. That visit didn't sit right with me even then. You don't treat family like that, especially on their birthday. I read her statement, standing on her porch, clear, factual, dated, and signed. A neighbor's testimony placing Brenda at my house for less than 5 minutes on March 15th, contradicting any claim that she'd spent time with me or properly delivered a gift. Thank you, Carol. You have no idea how much this means. That evening, I spread the evidence across my kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle assembling themselves. Facebook posts with timestamps showing Brenda celebrating her new Tesla on March 16th. A business card from a salesman who remembered her unusual cash purchase. A signed statement from a neighbor who witnessed her rushed, dismissive birthday visit. 3 independent sources. 3 different perspectives, all telling the same story. Brenda had stolen money meant for me and immediately spent it on herself, documenting her own crime through careless vanity. I took photos of everything arranged together, then carefully filed each piece in protective sleeves in a 3-ring binder. The binder went into a folder. The folder went into my desk drawer, right next to Judith Rice's demand letter. This was only the beginning. I knew that Brenda's attorney would argue, deflect, try to reframe the narrative. But evidence doesn't lie. Facts don't shift based on who's telling the story. I'd been a history teacher for 35 years. I knew how to research, how to verify sources, how to build an argument that could withstand scrutiny. Brenda thought she was fighting an old man who'd roll over and accept her version of events. She was wrong. I picked up my phone and texted Woodrow. Need to talk to Robert Coleman. I have evidence that might help your case. His response came back within minutes. Call him tomorrow. I'll let him know you're reaching out. What kind of evidence? I typed carefully. The kind that proves she documented her own theft. She posted everything online. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, of course, she did. I set the phone down and looked at the binder on my desk. 3 pieces of evidence, enough to establish a pattern, support a narrative, demonstrate that I wasn't making accusations. I was documenting facts. But deep in my gut, I knew this was just the opening move. Brenda had threatened me. She tried to make me the villain. She demanded $50,000 for damages I didn't cause. She wanted a fight. I was giving her one, but not with anger or emotion, with documentation, with evidence, with the patient, methodical accumulation of truth that she couldn't argue away or reframe. Let her attorney send threatening letters. Let Brenda rage and blame and play the victim. I had receipts. The folder sat on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon. 3 days had passed since my text to Woodrow about the evidence. And now on April 5th, I was reviewing everything one final time before my meeting with Robert Coleman. I spread the documents across the table in chronological order. Facebook screenshots showing Brenda's Tesla posts from March 16th. Timestamps clear and unambiguous. Carol's handwritten statement dated and signed describing the 2-minute birthday visit. My typed notes from the dealership conversation with Derek Patterson, complete with his business card, stapled to the corner. And finally, a printout of Woodrow's photograph, that manila envelope stuffed with $100 bills, timestamped the morning of my birthday. Each piece connected to the next like links in a chain. Theft, purchase, deception, documentation. Yet, I slipped everything back into the folder and drove downtown. Robert Coleman's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower with a view of the Willil River. His handshake was firm, professional, but his eyes widened slightly when I began removing documents from my folder. "Mr. Murphy," he said, arranging the papers across his polished desk. "This is remarkably thorough. Most family members in these situations react emotionally. You've approached this like a professional investigator." "I was a history teacher," I said. "Research and documentation were my profession for 30 years. He studied the Facebook posts, cross-referenced the timestamps, examined Carol's statement. "This witness, your neighbor, she's willing to testify if necessary." She offered without me asking. Robert leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "This changes our strategy significantly. We were prepared to argue theft based on Woodrow's testimony and the photo, but this he tapped the screenshots. She documented her own crime, posted it publicly within 24 hours. Arrogance, I said, or maybe she didn't think anyone would connect the dots. Either way, it's evidence a jury would understand immediately." He paused, looking at me directly. "The first hearing is April 10th, 5 days from now. Woodrow asked specifically if you'd attend for support." Something in my chest tightened. The idea of sitting in a courtroom watching this play out, being in the same room as Brenda, it felt like stepping into a gladiatorial arena, but Woodrow had asked. "I'll be there," I said. The morning of April 10th arrived cold and gray. I dressed in my Navy suit, the one I'd worn to retirement ceremonies and funerals, events that marked endings. The Multnomah County Courthouse loomed downtown, all concrete and authority. I parked in the public lot, walked through security, found the correct courtroom on the 3rd floor. Woodrow sat at a table beside Robert, his posture rigid. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped slightly. Relief, or maybe just the release of held tension. I took a seat in the gallery, 3 rows back, trying to be present without being intrusive. Brenda entered with Judith Rice, her attorney. She wore a conservative dress, hair pulled back, makeup minimal, the performance of a wronged woman. Our eyes didn't meet. She kept her gaze forward, but her shoulders carried tension like armor. The judge, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and reading glasses, reviewed documents while everyone settled. Then Robert stood. "Your Honor, we have clear documentation that Mrs. Murphy posted about a vehicle purchase on March 16th, the day after she received $100,000 in cash intended as a gift from my client's father." He displayed the Facebook posts on a screen, Brenda's smiling face next to the Tesla, hashtag celebrating her dream coming true. "The timing is not coincidental." Judith Rice half stood. "Objection. Circumstantial." Overruled. The judge didn't look up from a screen. "Continue, Mr. Coleman." Robert walked through each piece methodically. The neighbor's statement establishing the brief birthday visit. The dealership information about an unusual cash purchase. Woodrow's photograph of the original envelope. The timeline connecting every point. I watched Brenda's back stiffen with each revelation. Watched Judith lean close to whisper urgently. They hadn't expected this. They'd assumed we had only Woodrow's word against hers, emotions against denials. They'd been wrong. The judge removed her glasses, set them on the bench. Given the documentation presented, I'm ordering a full investigation into the financial transactions in question. Mrs. Murphy, you'll need to provide complete banking records for the past 6 months. We'll reconvene once that investigation is complete. The gavel fell like a door slamming shut. Outside the courtroom, Robert caught up with me in the hallway. This went better than I expected. The judge's order for financial investigation essentially validates our claims. So we won. Woodrow asked, hope threading through exhaustion. This round? Yes, but Mrs. Murphy's attorney won't stop fighting. Be prepared for escalation. Robert glanced at me. Both of you. I was driving home, windows down despite the cold because I needed air, when my phone rang. Brenda's name on the display. I pulled over to the side of the road and answered. You set me up. Her voice came through like breaking glass. You planned this from the beginning. You manipulated everything to make me look like I documented what happened. I interrupted, keeping my voice level. You stole money meant for me. That's not manipulation. That's fact. You think the court is the only battlefield? Her laugh was bitter, jagged. You have no idea what's coming. You've destroyed my life. Fine, let's see how you like it. The line went dead. I sat in my parked car on a side street in southeast Portland, watching traffic pass. Normal people going about normal days. The victory in court felt hollow suddenly, replaced by something colder. Brenda had sounded cornered, desperate, and desperate people don't retreat. They attack from unexpected angles. I started the car and drove the rest of the way home, checking my rear-view mirror more often than necessary, wondering what form her next assault would take. The changes started small. A phone call to Tom Patterson, a colleague I'd taught with for 15 years, went unreturned. At the grocery store 3 days after the hearing, my neighbor Janet waved, but didn't stop to chat like usual, her smile tight and brief. Coincidence, I told myself. People get busy. But the unease followed me home, like a shadow I couldn't quite see. On April 15th, I was working in my small garden, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants I'd started too early, when a car pulled up. A young woman approached carrying a manila envelope. Hubert Murphy. That's me. You've been served. I signed her tablet, accepted the envelope, and she was gone before I could ask questions I didn't really want answered. Inside, I brushed dirt from my hands and opened the documents at my kitchen table. Civil complaint. Brenda Murphy versus Hubert Murphy. My eyes tracked down the page, each line worse than the last. $75,000 in damages, defamation, emotional distress, intentional interference in marital relations. The language painted me as a toxic, controlling father-in-law who had fabricated evidence and manipulated my son against his innocent wife. I read it twice. The accusations were outrageous, but they were also calculated, strategic, designed to make me look vindictive and obsessed. She's trying to make me the villain in her story, I said to the empty kitchen. 3 days later, on April 18th, I sat across from Robert Coleman again. The complaint between us. This lawsuit is legally thin, Robert said, flipping through pages. She'd have trouble proving fabrication when we have documented evidence. But that's not really the point. What is the point? Pressure. She wants you to convince Woodrow to settle favorably just to make this go away. It's a common aggressive divorce tactic. He closed the file. You'll need to hire a separate attorney for this civil matter. I can recommend several good ones. I thought about my bank account, the modest teacher's pension, the costs adding up. What if I represent myself? Robert studied me carefully. It's legal in Oregon, but civil procedure is complex. You could advise me within ethical limitations. I could, but Hubert, he leaned forward. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. It's already ugly, I said. At least this way, I'm not paying someone else to tell me that. The phone call came on April 22nd, late afternoon, my cell ringing with a number I recognized but hadn't seen in months. David Chun, who taught mathematics in the classroom next to mine for a decade. David, good to hear from you. Hubert. His voice carried hesitation. I got a strange call from your son's wife. She seemed quite upset. Said some concerning things about family interference. My hand tightened on the phone. What exactly did she tell you? She said you've always been controlling with Woodrow. That you sabotaged their marriage because you were jealous of their success. A pause. This doesn't sound like you, but I had to ask. I stood, began pacing my living room. Here are the facts. She stole $100,000 that my son sent me for my birthday. When he discovered the theft, he filed for divorce. Everything else is her attempt to avoid accountability. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Then I thought there had to be more to it. Thanks for being straight with me. After we hung up, I made a list. Everyone who might be in Brenda's contact list from years of family gatherings, former colleagues, neighbors, friends I'd introduced her to at retirement parties. The pen pressed harder against paper as the names accumulated. Over the next few days, I discovered she'd contacted at least 6 people. Most calls followed the same pattern. She was the victim. I was manipulative. Woodrow was under my control. Some who knew me well dismissed her immediately. Others, like Janet at the grocery store, weren't sure what to believe. The isolation hurt worse than the lawsuit. Decades of building a reputation of being known as fair and decent, undermined by someone willing to lie systematically to anyone who'd listen. I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at the list of names when my laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Woodrow's face filled the screen and he looked terrible, exhausted, angry, something desperate around his eyes. Dad, I just found out about the lawsuit, and I've been getting calls, people asking me questions about you, about our relationship. His voice cracked slightly. She's trying to destroy you. She's trying to pressure us into settling, I said. It's strategy. This is insane. I should just give her whatever she wants and end this. No. I leaned toward the screen. That's exactly what she wants. We don't negotiate with people who steal and then lie about it. We see this through, but it's hurting you. Your friends, your reputation. I've handled worse. I lied. We stay the course. Woodrow rubbed his face with both hands. I never thought she'd go this far. Attack you personally. Lie to people you've known for years. What kind of person does that? The kind who's desperate, I said. The kind who knows they're losing. After the call ended, I sat in the blue glow of my laptop screen, thinking about Brenda's tactics. The lawsuit was theater designed to intimidate. The social campaign was more sophisticated, aimed at isolating me, making me toxic by association, hoping I'd convince Woodrow to settle just to stop the bleeding. But isolation only works if you believe you're alone. I pulled up my email and began typing messages to the people on my list. Not defending myself, not arguing, just stating facts, the timeline, the evidence, the court's preliminary ruling, letting them decide what to believe based on documentation rather than emotion. Some wouldn't respond, some wouldn't care, but others would read carefully, compare Brenda's story to mine, and recognize which one held together under scrutiny. By midnight, I'd sent 11 emails. My eyes burned from a screen, but something in my chest felt lighter. Not quite hope, more like determination crystallized into purpose. Brenda wanted to make me the villain. She wanted me isolated, desperate, willing to surrender just to end the attacks. She'd miscalculated badly. I wasn't the type to surrender. Never had been. 35 years in a classroom had taught me that truth, presented clearly and consistently, tends to win out over lies in the long run. Not always immediately, not without cost, but eventually people recognize which story makes sense and which one requires them to believe the improbable. I closed my laptop and looked at the lawsuit complaint on the table. $75,000 for emotional damages I hadn't caused. Let her file. Let her lie to my friends. Let her paint me as controlling and vindictive. I had documentation. I had witnesses. I had facts that could be verified by anyone willing to look. And most importantly, I had something Brenda didn't have. The patience to see this through to the end. No matter how long it took or how much damage she tried to inflict along the way, she'd started a war she couldn't win. She just didn't know it yet. 3 days after sending those emails, I sat at my desk with a fresh notebook, deliberately pushing the social warfare out of my mind. Hurt feelings wouldn't win this fight. Evidence would. I drew a line down the center of the page. Left column, what I know. Right column, what I need to know. On the left, I wrote everything I could remember about Brenda's spending habits during her marriage to Woodrow. The designer handbags she'd mentioned casually at holiday dinners, the spa weekends, the comments about great investment opportunities that she never quite explained. At the time, I'd assumed Woodrow's business success supported this lifestyle. Now those memories felt different, like clues I'd missed. On the right, I wrote one question. Where did all the money go? April 28th, I called Robert Coleman. Can we get her complete banking records? I asked. There's more here than just a stolen $100,000. Through the court's financial investigation? Absolutely. That's exactly what discovery is for. Papers rustled in the background. I'll file the request today. How long? Usually a week, maybe less. Oregon courts move pretty quickly on these matters when there's documented fraud. The envelope arrived on May 3rd, thick official, containing 2 years of bank statements from the joint account Woodrow and Brenda had shared. I made coffee, cleared my kitchen table completely, retrieved my highlighters and notebook. Then I began to read. The first few months looked normal. Grocery stores, utilities, gas stations, the rhythm of ordinary life. But then patterns emerged like shapes in fog. Cash withdrawals. Not huge amounts. $500 here, $800 there, but frequent. Too frequent. I used yellow highlighter for every cash withdrawal. By the time I finished the first year, the statements looked like they'd been attacked by a particularly aggressive bee. I started making lists, dates, amounts. No explanations appeared on the statements. Just ATM withdrawal repeated like an accusation. By the time I reached the most recent statements, my hand cramped from writing. I stood, stretched, looked at what I'd documented. Over 24 months, Brenda had withdrawn more than $35,000 in cash with no record of what she'd spent it on. But the discovery that made me set down my coffee and just stare came on page 47. March 8th, Tesla dealership. $5,000 listed as vehicle deposit. I walked to my calendar on the wall, counted backward from March 15th, my birthday, the day Woodrow gave Brenda the $100,000 meant for me. 1 week, exactly 1 week before she received the money, she'd made a down payment on the car. She planned this, I said to my empty kitchen. The whole thing was calculated. The theft was an impulse. It wasn't a moment of weakness or poor judgment. She'd already committed to buying that Tesla before Woodrow ever handed her the money. The 100,000 just allowed her to complete a purchase she'd orchestrated in advance. This changed everything. I spent the next 2 days organizing the evidence, creating a timeline with highlighted sections, cross-referencing transactions. On May 6th, I drove to Robert Coleman's office, carrying a folder that had grown substantially thicker. $35,000 in unexplained cash withdrawals. Robert flipped through the statements, his professional composure cracking slightly. Over 2 years, and the Tesla deposit before she even had the money. I slid the March 8th statement across his desk. This was an impulse. It was a plan. Robert studied the document, his finger tracing the date. This changes everything. When we present this at the next hearing, we're not just showing she stole your birthday gift. We're showing a pattern of financial deception throughout the marriage. Premeditation, systematic depletion of marital assets. He looked up at me, and something in his expression had shifted from professional respect to genuine admiration. You've built a case that any prosecutor would envy, he said. Most clients' family members get emotional and reactive. You got methodical and thorough. I was a history teacher. I reminded him. Primary sources, documentation, verification. It's what I know how to do. Well, it's about to pay off. Robert began making notes on a legal pad. The next hearing is scheduled for May 12th, 6 days from now. Judge Chin will see this evidence, and it's going to be very difficult for Brenda's attorney to explain away a deposit made before the money was stolen. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Genuine hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from wishing things would improve, but the earned kind that comes from building something solid. Evidence, documentation, facts that couldn't be argued away or reframed. Brenda had been careless. She documented her own crimes, first with social media posts about the Tesla, now with financial records showing she'd planned the purchase before the theft. Her arrogance, her certainty that no one would look closely enough or care enough to investigate had created a paper trail that led directly to her guilt. The civil lawsuit she'd filed against me suddenly felt less threatening. Let her claim I defamed her or interfered in her marriage. I had bank statements showing systematic financial misconduct. I had dates proving premeditation. I had a timeline that couldn't be manipulated or denied. At home, I made dinner, something simple, pasta with vegetables, and ate at my kitchen table, surrounded by organized folders of evidence. The cheap socks had long since disappeared into a drawer somewhere, irrelevant now. What mattered was documentation, truth, the patient accumulation of facts that would speak louder than any accusation or lie. May 12th was 6 days away. 6 days until Brenda would sit in a courtroom and watch her carefully constructed lies collapse under the weight of her own financial records. I cleaned my dishes, put away the folders, and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Not victory, not yet, but the certainty that I'd done the work necessary to achieve it. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I'd be ready. May 12th arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. I dressed in my navy suit for the third time, checked my wallet for parking money, and reviewed my notes one final time at my kitchen table. The file containing all the financial evidence sat beside my coffee cup. Though I wouldn't need to bring it, Robert had everything prepared. The drive downtown felt different this time, less anxious, more like a soldier heading to a battle he knew he could win because he'd done the reconnaissance, understood the terrain, prepared properly. I found the same parking spot I'd used before, walked through the same security checkpoint, climbed the same stairs to the third-floor courtroom. But when I entered and took my seat in the gallery, my posture was different, straighter, more confident. Woodrow sat to the attorney's table beside Robert, his shoulders tight with tension. When he glanced back and saw me, something in his face relaxed slightly. I nodded once. We were here. We were ready. Brenda entered with Judith Rice, and I watched her carefully. She wore a conservative gray suit, her hair pulled back severely, makeup minimal, the costume of someone trying to look wronged and dignified, but there was tension in her jaw, a tightness around her eyes. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. Judge Chin took the bench promptly at 9. We're here for the continued hearing in Murphy's Murphy regarding the financial investigation ordered by this court. Mr. Coleman, you may proceed. Robert stood, and even his posture communicated controlled confidence. Your Honor, the financial investigation has revealed a pattern of misconduct far beyond the original theft we documented. He gestured, and the courtroom screen lit up with the first bank statement, transactions highlighted in yellow. Over a 24-month period, Mrs. Murphy withdrew more than $35,000 in cash from the marital account. These withdrawals have no corresponding documentation, no explanation, no record of legitimate expenses. The screen changed, showing page after page of highlighted withdrawals. I watched Brenda's shoulders tense, watched Judith Rice lean over to whisper urgently. However, Your Honor, the most significant evidence is this. Robert's laser pointer highlighted a single transaction. March 8th, 7 days before Mr. Hubert Murphy's birthday. Mrs. Murphy made a $5,000 deposit to the Tesla dealership. He paused, letting the date sink in. This proves the vehicle purchase was planned before she ever received the $100,000 meant for Mr. Murphy's father. This was not impulse. This was calculation. This was premeditated theft. Judith Rice stood quickly. Your Honor, Mrs. Murphy's use of marital funds during the marriage was entirely legal. The timing of this deposit may simply be coincidental. Counselor, Judge Chen's voice cut through the objection like a blade. We're not discussing marital funds. We're discussing money that never legally belonged to your client. It was stolen before reaching its intended recipient. Judith sat down faster than she'd stood up. The judge reviewed the documents in silence, her expression unreadable. I watched Brenda's hands grip the edge of the table, knuckles white. Watched her lean toward her attorney, say something I couldn't hear. Watched Judith shake her head slightly, as if to say there was nothing she could do. Finally, Judge Chin spoke. The evidence presented demonstrates not only theft of the $100,000, but a pattern of financial misconduct and premeditated deception. She looked directly at Brenda. "Mrs. Murphy, you are hereby ordered to repay the full amount, $100,000, to Mr. Hubert Murphy, the intended recipient of that gift." Woodrow's shoulders dropped with relief. I felt something loosen in my own chest. Furthermore, the judge continued, "This demonstrated bad faith significantly impacts your claims regarding marital asset division. The majority of your demands are denied. You will receive what is legally equitable given your documented dishonesty. But this court will not reward financial deception." The gavel fell. Brenda stood mechanically as the court adjourned, gathering her papers with hands that trembled slightly. She didn't look at Woodrow, didn't glance toward the gallery where I sat, just moved toward the exit like someone in shock. Judith Rice following behind, trying to speak to her, while Brenda seemed not to hear. In the hallway, Woodrow found me immediately. "Dad, we did it." The judge saw the truth. "This is a major step," I said carefully. "But her lawsuit against me is still pending. We're not finished yet." After today, Woodrow shook his head. "She has to back down now. She has to see she can't win." I thought about Brenda's face as she'd left the courtroom. The shock, the disbelief, but also something harder underneath. Something that looked less like acceptance and more like barely contained fury. People like Brenda don't back down easily. I said. Robert joined us, looking satisfied, but professional. "This is as decisive a ruling as we could have hoped for. The financial investigation paid off." He looked at me directly. "Your work on this made the difference. That March deposit, that was the detail that proved premeditation. Now we wait to see if she drops the civil suit," I said, "or if she's foolish enough to pursue it." Robert's tone suggested he thought the latter more likely. We walked out of the courthouse together, the gray sky finally breaking into rain. I pulled my jacket collar up, felt the cold drops on my face, and allowed myself a moment of genuine satisfaction. The judge had ordered Brenda to repay the $100,000. She'd rejected most of Brenda's asset claims. She called out the pattern of financial deception publicly on the record. This was vindication. This was justice beginning to unfold the way it should. But as I drove home through the rain, windshield wipers beating steady rhythm, I couldn't shake the image of Brenda's face in that courtroom. The shock, yes. The defeat, certainly. But underneath both something that looked dangerously like determination. She still had her civil lawsuit against me. $75,000 in claimed damages. Her attorney might advise dropping it after today's catastrophic hearing. Any reasonable person would, but Brenda had never struck me as particularly reasonable. I parked in my driveway, sat for a moment, watching rain streak down the windows, and prepared myself for whatever came next. We'd won a major battle today. The evidence had spoken. The judge had ruled in our favor decisively, but the war might not be over. Some people knew when to surrender. Others just kept fighting, even when the ground beneath them had already collapsed. I had a feeling Brenda was the second type. The week after the divorce hearing, victory felt strange, quiet, like standing in the aftermath of a storm, checking for damage, finding everything still standing. But one threat remained. Brenda's civil lawsuit demanding $75,000 for emotional damages I hadn't caused. On May 20th, I sat at my desk organizing my defense for the hearing scheduled for May 25th. Robert Coleman couldn't officially represent me in civil court. Conflict of interest, he'd explained, but he'd spent an hour on the phone walking me through self-representation strategy. "Keep it factual," he'd said. "You're not a lawyer, so don't try to sound like one. Just tell the truth." "That's all I've ever done in this situation," I'd replied. "The truth is my only defense because it's my only weapon. And a powerful one. The divorce court already validated everything you found." I spread my documents across the desk, the divorce court's written decision from May 12th, my organized timeline of evidence gathering, copies of everything I provided to Robert for Woodrow's case. Then I opened my desk drawer and retrieved something I'd kept secure for weeks, a small digital voice recorder. After Brenda's first threatening phone call, the one where she'd warned I'd regret this, I'd started recording our conversations. Oregon law permits one-party consent recording when there's reasonable belief of threats or harassment. Her voice saying she'd destroy me and Woodrow gave me that reasonable belief. I connected the recorder to my laptop, transferred the files, and listened through headphones one final time. Her voice came through clearly, venomous and threatening. This was the person claiming to be my victim. On May 25th, I walked into the civil courtroom alone. No attorney beside me, just folders of documentation and a portable speaker in my briefcase. Brenda sat at the plaintiff's table with Judith Rice, who stood to present their case first. Her voice carried theatrical indignation as she described a controlling father-in-law who'd maliciously destroyed an innocent woman's marriage through fabricated evidence and manipulation. I sat quietly, making occasional notes, but mostly just observing, watching the performance, waiting my turn. When Judith finished, the judge looked at me. "Mr. Murphy, your response." I stood, moved to the podium with my notes, and addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I gathered evidence of theft. My son sent me $100,000 for my birthday. His wife kept it and bought herself a car. These are facts proven in divorce court. I gestured to my documentation. I didn't fabricate anything. I documented what actually happened and provided it through proper legal channels to my son's attorney. I walked through my evidence gathering step by step, social media posts, public information, neighbor testimony, voluntary statement, dealership conversation, legal inquiry, banking records obtained through court-ordered discovery. Everything I found was verified as truthful by Judge Chun in the divorce proceeding. I said, "I'm not defending against accusations of lying because the truth has already been established in another court." Then I retrieved the portable speaker from my briefcase. "However, there's one piece of evidence I'd like the court to hear. After the first divorce hearing, Mrs. Murphy called me. I recorded these calls legally under Oregon's one-party consent law, which permits recording when there's reasonable belief of threats. I connected my phone to the speaker and pressed play. Brenda's voice filled the courtroom sharp and clear. "You think you can destroy my life and walk away? You're going to regret interfering in my marriage. I'll make sure of it. I'll destroy you and Woodrow both if I have to." The recording continued for 30 seconds. When it ended, I looked at the judge. I recorded these calls legally after her first threat. This is who was actually threatening whom, Your Honor. I returned to my seat. The judge made notes. Brenda's face had gone pale. "I'll issue a written ruling within 72 hours, the judge said. 3 days later, on May 28th, the decision arrived by mail. I read it standing in my kitchen, coffee growing cold on the counter. The lawsuit was dismissed completely. The judge's language was precise and damning. The claims were without merit, appeared retaliatory in nature, and constituted potential abuse of the judicial system to punish someone for providing truthful evidence. Moreover, Brenda was ordered to pay my court costs, $3,500. I set the document down carefully and walked to my window. The street outside looked ordinary, cars passing, neighbors walking dogs, life continuing its normal rhythm. But something fundamental had shifted. Every legal battle was finished, every threat neutralized, every accusation answered with documented truth. Brenda had tried to make me the villain through lies, lawsuits, and social warfare. The courts had responded by validating everything I had documented and penalizing her for the attempt. This wasn't revenge. This was justice working exactly as it should, slowly, methodically, but inevitably reaching the truth. I called Woodrow that evening. "It's over," I said. The civil suit was dismissed. She asked to pay my costs. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I thought we'd been disconnected. Then I heard him exhale long and shaky. "You saved me, Dad, from everything. The money, the marriage, all of it. I just documented what was real," I said. The truth did the rest. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with the dismissal order in front of me. For months ago, I'd stood at the same table opening a gift bag containing $5 socks, feeling forgotten and diminished. Now I sat with court documents vindicating everything I'd fought for. The transformation wasn't about the legal victories, though those mattered. It was about reclaiming something essential, the confidence that I could protect what mattered. That fairness wasn't just a concept, but something achievable through patience, documentation, and refusing to surrender to lies. Outside, the evening sun cast long shadows across my rental house. I had one more thing to wait for, The $100,000 Brenda had been ordered to repay, plus the $3,500 in costs from this lawsuit. $13,500. But more important than the money was what it represented. Consequences delivered, justice served, and a fundamental fairness restored to a situation that had begun with cruel deception. I could wait. I'd proven I was good at that. The final divorce hearing on June 5th was a formality. Judge Chin reviewed the terms one last time, converting all previous rulings into a binding decree. I sat in the gallery, my usual seat, watching the conclusion of a battle that had consumed 4 months of my life. Brenda received $40,000 from the marital home sale. That was all. Everything else, Woodrow's business, his investments, his future remained his, and she owed me $13,500. The judge addressed the practical issue directly. Mrs. Murphy clearly cannot pay this amount immediately. Therefore, she is ordered to sell the Tesla Model Y within 10 days, with proceeds paid directly to Mr. Hubert Murphy. The remaining balance will be paid in monthly installments over 24 months at the standard judgment interest rate. I watched Brenda's shoulders slump. The car that symbolized her betrayal would be the first thing surrendered to pay for it. There was poetry in that. On June 20th, a certified check arrived by registered mail. $30,000. The proceeds from selling the Tesla, minus what she still owed on the loan. I stood in my kitchen holding the check, and for a long moment I didn't look at the amount. I just felt the weight of what it represented. Justice fulfilled, consequences delivered, a fundamental fairness restored. It was never about the money, I said quietly to my empty kitchen. It was about what was right, and now it is right. 5 days later, Woodrow and I met for lunch at a comfortable restaurant on Southeast Hawthorne. The first truly relaxed meal we'd shared since my birthday. When he walked in and we embraced, both of us held on an extra moment. The stress that had carved lines into his face for months had lifted. He looked younger, lighter. "Dad, I don't know how to thank you." He sat across from me, hands wrapped around a water glass. "You saved me from the biggest mistake of my life. If you hadn't documented everything, gathered that evidence, I did what any father would do." I interrupted gently. I protected my family. We ordered, talked about ordinary things. His work, my garden, the weather turning warmer, conversation that didn't revolve around lawyers or court dates or evidence. It felt like breathing freely after being underwater. Then Woodrow set down his fork and looked at me seriously. "I want to help you buy a house, a real one, not rented. You sold yours for me. Now let me do this for you. I'll do it right this time." Something warm spread through my chest, not just at the offer, but at the recognition behind it. He understood what I'd sacrificed, what I'd lost to help him build his business. "I accept," I said, "but on one condition, we document everything properly. Official agreement, written terms, not because I don't trust you, but because we both learned that documentation protects everyone." Woodrow smiled and it was genuine. "Agreed. Everything in writing, signatures, witnesses, the whole thing." He paused. "You taught me that lesson the hard way, but I learned it." I pulled out my notebook, the same type I'd used during my investigation, and made a note. We both smiled at that, a shared understanding of wisdom earned through difficulty. The afternoon sun slanted through the restaurant window, turning everything golden. I turned to watch it, feeling something settle in my chest. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of resolution. She moved away. I heard. I said, "Try and start over in another state." Robert mentioned that. Woodrow's voice was neutral. "Doesn't matter where she goes. Those court records are public." "That's not my revenge," I said. "That's just consequences. I didn't destroy her life. She did that herself the moment she chose theft over honesty." We finished lunch slowly, neither of us in a hurry to leave. This moment, father and son, threat eliminated, future bright, felt worth savoring. For months ago, I'd been alone at a table set for one, opening cheap socks. Now I sat across from my son, planning a shared future built on trust and proper documentation. When we finally stood to leave, Woodrow hugged me again. "I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took almost losing everything to show me how much you matter." "You never lost me," I said. "I was always here." Driving home, I thought about everything that had happened since March 15th. The theft, the confrontation, the investigation, the court battles, the vindication. A journey from victim to strategist to survivor. But the real transformation wasn't about evidence or legal victories. It was about reclaiming something essential, the confidence that I could protect what mattered, that justice, though it required patience and documentation, and refusing to surrender, was achievable. I parked in front of my rental house, soon to be replaced by something I actually owned again, walked inside, made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, where this whole journey had begun. The cheap socks were long gone, discarded or donated somewhere. They didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the stack of legal documents on my desk proving that truth. When documented carefully and presented properly, defeats lies every time. Brenda would pay installments for 2 years. Every month, a reminder of consequences, every payment. Proof that theft carries a price. But I wouldn't dwell on that. Wouldn't waste energy on anger or bitterness. She'd made her choices. The courts had delivered appropriate consequences. My job was to move forward into the house, would help me buy into whatever years remained into a future built on wisdom earned the hard way. I stood at my window as evening approached, watching shadows lengthen across my quiet street. The journey from birthday victim to vindicated survivor had taken 4 months, but it had returned something more valuable than money. My dignity, my confidence, my certainty that I could face injustice and respond not with rage, but with methodical documented truth. That was worth more than $100,000. That was worth everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.